it's so true. As you were saying that, I was remembering, I don't think I've ever said this story on the podcast. Probably no need to, but when I was 1 years old, my parents always tell me the story that well, I was born in Dubai. And so they, I guess, took me to India to, just as like a trip. And on the way back, my dad realized he forgot my passport. And so they had to leave me with my grandma for a month in India.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was like super, and I loved my grandma. I was super,
Sure.
super, super close to her. But for some reason, at 1 years old, knew what was happening. And so when I finally got back with my parents, my mom was like, for some reason, Tash, you came to me, you would not go to your dad. Like you were just so mad at him for like letting you down, I think. And it's so crazy because you think, well,
Yeah.
well, what would a 1 year old know? But we don't know exactly what happened, but we just absorbed certain energies, I'm sure. Um,
Sure.
and that was really like a very much of a marker for our relationship. I have a great
Mm,
relationship with my mom, and I would always get like immensely angry with my dad.
yeah,
And I always felt let down by him in many ways. And so, it's weird. Like, can you trace it back to that or those kinds of
for
moments? I don't
sure.
know, but
Yep.
there's something that gets etched in sort of your being.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the body keeps the score is the
Yes.
term that is used for that. And what you're describing is what we call pre-verbal trauma. So you don't have to be able to recall or verbalize what happened. Your body knows damn well what happened. And when we think about attachment styles and we think about for a child, it's about at 9 months that the attachment is solidified with their primary caregivers. So that was really traumatic for 1 year old you, for sure. That is a lot of abandonment that was, the base of your narrative now.
Yeah, no, definitely. And but when we talk about it and we talk about the fact that this is so rooted in childhood and times of our life that we didn't control, how could we even start to reprogram
Yeah. Yeah,
something
which
like that?
is valid, and that's also the part that's so important to me is to provide hope because the aspect with attachment styles that I think sometimes becomes a little disheartening or a little defeating is that it's like, okay, cool, you're telling me how I show up, but now what? And with the reprogramming aspect of it, there is a now what. It is identifying the activity that I take my clients through is doing a timeline from birth to present day. And so events that like you just described, we would be identifying and we are talking about the themes that take place throughout the lifespan and how they continue to show up. But then also how we sometimes end up in relationships, or a lot of times end up in relationships with people who perpetuate those traumas because, again, it's all we know. So we are drawn to that. The brain is wired for what's familiar. So we're drawn to it and it continues to perpetuate. When we bring awareness to our programming that, okay, these are our themes, this is what continued to happen. And now let me look at my romantic relationships. Oh, yeah, that makes sense why I was drawn to this person and that person because, their tendencies mirrored a lot of this. Okay, so first of all, we have to have awareness of the people that we're getting in relationship with that are mirroring our programming and then also our survival behaviors. So we keep acting in certain ways because it's what kept us safe at one point and is now causing harm. And when we increase our awareness around those things, and then we identify the specifics that need to change, and then allow time for adaptation because we did not get programmed overnight. We're not going to reprogram overnight, which is commonly what happens. People will just give up and go back to what's familiar. So that's where the reprogramming can be difficult. But awareness, identification of change, and then adaptation, that is really the recipe for starting your reprogramming.
Yeah, and like you said, it is very important to know that it takes time. You know,
Yeah.
I really do feel like I have reprogrammed a good chunk of my brain when it comes to relationships as somebody who had a lot of trauma around it, and it took a good chunk of time. And even then you're constantly working at it because
Yes.
your mind wants to deflect back to its old self. But I
Right.
do think that that's a very relatable thing for people, name of your podcast, that, we find ourselves in the same pattern over and over and over and over again. I just do think it's hard for people to believe that they can actually reprogram.
Yeah. Because it's hard, because it requires action. So it doesn't matter how many podcasts you listen to, it doesn't matter how many books you read, it doesn't matter how many therapists you see. If you're not applying that knowledge that you're gaining, the reprogramming can't take place. And the hardest part of that is that forcing ourselves out of our comfort zone to do something that feels so uncomfortable and so even distressing sometimes, that's really hard. And we can compare it to losing weight or breaking a habit or, anything like that, that we know we exactly what you just said. We are drawn back to what's familiar. We're drawn back to what we're used to. But when we start to make it a habit and just pick something small to implement, just pick something that is just like a day-to-day thing we're going to just slowly start to add in, it does, snowball over time. But that is my biggest takeaway. Like, I can give all the knowledge in the world on attachment styles and programming and all of that. But my biggest takeaway is like, just pick something and do it. And that's where you'll get the change.
Yeah, I remember when I started this process, I had come out of an abusive relationship. This is back in the day. Listeners know about it, so I won't get into it. But it was very abusive, and when I came out, I totally identified. Oh my gosh, how could I get in this? Oh wow, this feels familiar with
Mhm.
sort of the chaos I was going through at home. And then I realized, like, okay, well, what's happening? And the first thing I noticed was, well, some part of me was scared of being alone.
Mm.
So I decided I'm going to train myself to learn to be alone. And so I started, my simplest step was I forced myself to go to movies by myself.
Mm.
And it felt so uncomfortable. And like I had never eaten by myself. It was just things
Ah,
that we're not trained to do.
sure.
And I would force myself to go do it, like sit at a restaurant by myself and eat
Yeah.
and not worry what people were thinking about me and learn to enjoy the meal. And same thing with the movie. The movie I very much remember because it was I don't know, it was the worst feeling in the world getting yourself
Mhm.
up to go watch a movie by yourself in a movie theater.
Yes.
Because it feels like such a date activity or a friend activity. Um, but when I did it, it felt amazing once I
Right.
became free of that.
Yeah.
And then fast forward in time, I like loved my time alone. And then I really, somebody needed to be of great value really for me to want to spend my alone time with them.
And I love that example because that really demonstrates the difference with programming versus traditional couples counseling or traditional therapy in general. Because what you're describing, definitely we could tie into attachment styles, the difference between like anxious and avoidant, but we can also tie that in culturally. So you being raised in a collectivist society and me being raised in an individualistic society, for me, it's the opposite. I'm like, I have to force myself to be like, okay, fine, you can come over. Okay, fine, I'll go on a date. Like, it is so the opposite because I feel so much safer being by myself and being alone. But that is what the reprogramming is, because in traditional therapy, they're going to give you and I the same, okay, here you go, here's your recipe. But with this relationship programming, no, we're going to understand what's specific to you, what's specific to me, and what changes those need to be made. And your example of the change is perfect. I mean, that's exactly it. Pick something when you know you're making choices about your relationships based in um, whether it is overly pursuing people or people pleasing, or okay, well then choose not to do that, whatever it looks like. But yeah, I mean, that's a great example
Yeah, and it's all baby steps. So listeners,
for
just
sure.
keep like I appreciate you just saying that it takes some time and it takes a series of steps basically.
Yes.
I hope you guys enjoyed that video and check out our next one. Thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe to this channel for more amazing dating, love, and relationship advice from me and so many expert guests. Follow us on socials. We're at Kinda Dating across the board. I'm Natasha Chandel, so you can find me too if you like. And join our newsletter on www.kindadating.com for lots of exclusives. See you soon.